what has the impact of FinTech been over the last decade? And what will it deliver in the next 10 years? How do we work together as an ecosystem in partnership to drive change? And what is the responsibility of the sector to harness tech for good, to scale responsibly and lead towards a net zero future? And what is the UK's role on the global FinTech stage? So we have some really important discussions coming up, looking at all of these themes. So starting with that question of how we harness technology for good. Please do join our conversation, like I said in the morning, on social media with the hashtag FinTech for Good, and please do tag Innovate Finance at InFin. So kicking us off for part 2, I am delighted to introduce Michael Mainelli, who is the chairman of ZN Group Limited, who is also the Alderman for Broad Street, Lord Mayor of London-elect 2023-2024. ZN is the City of London's leading commercial think tank, founded in 1994 to promote societal advancement through better finance and technology. It has built its practice around a core of high-powered project managers supported by experienced technical specialists so that clients get the expertise they need rather than just the resources available. So without further ado, Michael, can I please welcome you on stage?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it really is interesting to be here indeed. Interesting because I was so pleased to hear the title of this event, FinTech for Good. I don't think we spend enough time talking about for good. We talk about for profit, we talk about revolution, we talk about disruptive, but we don't talk about the good that we intend to do. And fundamental to talking about good is ethics. And so what I thought I'd kick off with today was not exactly a sort of series of bland statements, but really get you going into where we are headed on ethics. And I'm going to address specifically artificial intelligence, or AI. So we'll come to that in a moment. Now you've heard the introduction, which is great. I must get our advertising team in touch with you, and we owe a bit of cash. But you'll know that I run the Global Financial Centers Index, the Smart Centers Index, and the Global Green Finance Index with my team. But what you may not be aware of is that over 30 years we've been involved very much in FinTech, long before it was called FinTech, which is the combination very much of IT and technology. In fact, I came to the city in '84 really just to put computers into traditional financial institutions. So that's 39 years of FinTech, if you will. But what's interesting for me has been that the conjunction of all of these technologies is offering up enormous realms of opportunity. So what I'd like to chat to you about today is really very quickly 4 things: the role of technology in ethics, what is commercial ethics. I want to talk about some of the problems we have when we look at ethics as being something that needs to be regulated or something that needs to be left to the free market. And I want to discuss an ethical AI initiative that I have launched and which will come into full fruition on the 10th of November when I take office. So what's the first thing? Well, there are some darn good gags about this. I love this one here. This AI stuff is terrifying. We've created technology that could destroy us as we sit in a kind of a global warming environment. And it is intriguing. I was at the Royal Society yesterday, and one of the best questions was, when you're doing climate modeling, do you look at the huge amounts of power that you're consuming and look at minimizing them? So there are ethical issues even within that. Now we know that technology is a two-edged sword, and I won't go into sort of the obvious problems, but our job is to make sure that technology does benefit society and actually minimizes harm. But there's some problems with that. The Europeans would have you focus very much on the precautionary principle. Don't do anything at all until you're absolutely sure that it will do no harm whatsoever. Frankly, at that level, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. So we have to take some kind of risk to introduce new technology. Funnily enough, we had these debates 20 years ago, and those were held within the British Computer Society and other organizations, and we created a methodology called DIOD, which I'll show you in a moment. It was interesting what the problem was then. The problem then was, what if we introduced mobile phones into Africa And we said, we're going to offer this fantastic payment system to Africans. Isn't that a really good thing? Well, the ethical issue was, hang on, to use it, they need mobile phones. And a mobile phone is 4 to 5 months of salary for your average person in the country you're looking at. And how long are you going to be there? Well, if we don't make money in 9 months, we wrap up and we go away. So where are the ethics in that? Oh, I was trying to do the right thing. Well, maybe you were, but you were leaving a lot of destitute people in your wake simply because you were only focused on the profit motive. So, is it a new issue? Well, clearly it's not. One of the things I find really amusing is listening to people on Radio 4 pontificating that we in the sector have spent no time thinking about the ethics of artificial intelligence or machine learning, which is, I think, what those of us older in the field would prefer. I myself have been building a machine learning system since the late 70s, and I've got several still in operation that are over 25 years old, still used on a daily basis. So it's not a new issue for us. Isaac Asimov in the 1940s wrote a whole series of articles called I, Robot, which he wrapped up in a book that he published in December 1950. And if you've ever read I, Robot, anybody here's read I, Robot? Yeah, come on, nerds, be honest. What it's about. It says robot, and it was basically the ethics of AI. One should do no harm, etc. So it's not a new issue, and I'm glad to see that it is an issue here with Innovate Finance. So what is the precautionary principle? Well, this is something that has, I think, divided forces on both sides of the Atlantic. Within the European context, or particularly I spend a lot of time in Germany, within the German context, this is invoked. But actually, taken not even to an extreme, but taken quite lightly, it basically says you can't do anything at all until you know all of the possible consequences. And I just gave you an example of mobile phones and economics, and you're sitting there saying, but I was just trying to bring out a mobile phone application. I didn't need to think about the economics. Well, that's hardly an ethical approach. So what might an ethical approach be? Well, sorry, there we go, wrong slide. As I said, the precautionary principle, in my opinion, leads to inaction. There are some more positive approaches that you can take. So Diode was created by the British Computer Society and launched about 15 years ago. It went through a fairly rigorous process of examining all of the various ways in which you could address some of these ethical issues, and I'll come on to what was defined at the end. But people say repeatedly, yes, but why isn't Diode used? Well, Diode's not used because very few businesses spend any time on ethics, do they? We're in a race to get the product to market. The last thing we want is an ethical consideration at the front. But I think those times are leaving us. We used to just marvel at the fact we could get software to do anything of use. But now we're relying on software as a utility, and that's a completely different thing. It's like moving from Michael Faraday producing sparks in a laboratory to the fact that we rely on electricity on a daily basis. And you wouldn't take the kind of the ethical thing where the electricity company or the person who provided you with your appliance said, well, it's your own fault that you got electrified, it's not ours. So we're moving in that across all areas of IT, but particularly in finance. Now, ethics is a complex area, and we have this kind of woke-up tree of things that you could do. And if you look at some of the international standards on ethics, and yes, there are international standards on ethics under the ISO system, they tend to look very much at, is it teleological or deontological? We went through this at great length 17, 16, 15 years ago, and we actually latched onto something that is used in the medical arena. It's a thing called principalism. Now, principalism is used by folks in the medical area because they have to make pragmatic decisions on the ground. They're conscious that there is no particular right answer in what they do. And it has grown into largely 4 principles that I'll enumerate quickly. The first is beneficence. You must be trying to do something good. The second is non-maleficence. In trying to do something good, you're not targeting somebody else. It relies very much on autonomy. Are you respecting the autonomy of other people to make their own decisions? And justice. Overall, does this all kind of add up? So if you think of yourself as somebody who's created a vaccine, which seems to have been quite popular the last 3 years to do that sort of thing, and you're looking at this vaccine, you say, well, is it beneficent? Well, clearly it is. I'm trying to save lives. Yeah, but hang on a minute. Isn't there sort of a 3 in a million death rate? Yeah, but that's just the way it goes. Well, what if I'm one of those 3 million? I look at this very differently. Non-maleficence. Imagine that you had a vaccine that was great on lots of the population, but not so good on others, but you just sort of decided to do it. But you might have been a racist and decided, I love targeting that group of people, and the fact that they've got a small problem with it happens to suit me. So yeah, it's a bit science fiction as well, but still, it's there. Autonomy. Obviously, everybody gets to choose whether or not they take the vaccine. That goes without saying, right? Well, unless they're under 12, in which case we'll force them to have it, or they're in a care home, in which case we know what the right answer is for them. And finally, you kind of wrap that up into a decision. So people in the field of medical ethics have to make these decisions on a fairly frequent basis, and there is no right answer. But what they insist on seeing, absolutely insist on seeing, is that all 4 of those areas have been thought about. All 4 of those areas have been evidenced. And then you've made a balanced decision because there is no right answer in any of them, as I just showed you in a fairly simple case of a vaccine, which all of you would know about. However, our considerations for AI, machine learning, and IT for that matter, we do think there's potentially a 5th principle, and that is explicability. And this, I think, has been one of the big issues in the machine learning field is, can I explain what's going on? I could drone on about some of the difficulties there, not least as, one of the best things about neural nets when they started in the 70s was, how does it work? Well, that's the best thing. I've got no clue. It just takes a lot of data and comes up with an answer. My doctorate's in statistics, so I tend to dissect these things. I'm probably a bit too anal about it. But for me, the important thing is that we have to go a lot further towards explicability. And in fact, if you look at the EU's AI law, which is coming out, it's quite interesting. They have actually no definition of AI. If you read it, the very first clause says AI is anything defined in Annex 1, and Annex 1 is just a list of tools and techniques that are used in just about any computer system going at scale. And explicability becomes an interesting problem there as well. So I was actually remarking to them that so far as I was concerned, the EU AI law requires things like, can I explain why your case is different than her case, even though she and you are only £1,000 apart in income? Can I explain why I denied you based on your postcode, a car loan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah, that's fine, but in fact, you could call that a bureaucracy law. Can I explain any bureaucracy? And there's a very interesting case many of you will have seen came to a head last year in the Netherlands, where the benefits office claimed it was relying on an AI system, made some bad decisions, and started hounding citizens for monies that they didn't owe. This led to a number of suicides, a number of stressed out people, all sorts of problems. The Dutch said, well, that was absolutely terrible, and the AI was to blame. I disagree. There were people enforcing it. There were people who were sending the letters. There were people who were getting the complaint calls and ignoring them. So there's an interesting kind of wider bureaucracy thing. Don't just focus on the systems. So I said we'd talk about it a third way. Well, in the United States, as you know, they're taking a bit of a kind of a Wild West approach to this. Build your systems, and if they stuff me in some way, I'll see you in court. Well, that's certainly one approach. The other approach is the EU one, which is going to regulate. And if you've really read the AI law, you'll realize we're going to regulate any computer system of any size whatsoever that touches somebody else. So that's kind of an interesting problem. But we in Britain have always had standards markets. These are accreditation and certification systems, these days often called testing, inspection, and certification. And so we decided that we wanted to look very much at the standards in the artificial intelligence area and get ahead of the curve, certainly ahead of the Radio 4 crowd. So I've actually had some of the Radio 4 crowd in my office, and I've tried to explain to them that there are 3 ISO standards. One is on the management and creation of AI systems, one is on the risks of AI, and the third one is on the ethics of AI. Oh, I wasn't aware that there were those standards. No, but you were ready to pontificate on Radio 4, having not done your homework. And if you know anything about ISO standards, these have been 20 years in the making, and they came out several years ago. So we in the community have now finally got an opportunity to use what we've been working on. So we're taking the diode methodology, we're taking the standards, and we're starting to apply them. And so in June, we kicked off, the 695th Lord Mayor, whoever he is, we kicked off his Ethical AI initiative. And we have a host of organizations. This is actually only a small fraction. And we've created a course that costs 150 quid. It's a 12-hour course, and you get a certificate from the Chartered Institute for Securities Investment if you take it, which isn't a bad thing to do. And it's using all the things that I alluded to earlier. And I would encourage you to take it. That's kind of my sales pitch. But it won't stop there. There are wider issues to do with ethics, but I think we in the industry can take this little baby step, get things moving, able to show that we have people there. We opened for registration last month, and I'm going to find the final numbers that they are now, but we were well over 50 people in the course. These are mostly senior managers who actually know what they're doing, because we want senior individuals to take it. So if in your organizations you want to show responsibility about the ethics of AI and participate in the course, ask one or two of your senior people to do 12 hours worth of work to see where it is and get a certificate for it. However, it's not about the certificate. There are going to be wider issues, possibly about the way in which firms themselves might seek some type of certification, but we thought we would start with a baby step here. We are, interestingly, seeing huge amounts of interest from 3 other professions already who are sitting as observers, and that's the Law Society for Legal, that's also the Certified Accountants, and also the Chartered Surveyors. All want us to donate the body of materials that we're doing, which are, as you'd expect, open access, and they will write their own case studies and issue their own certificates to their own professional members. So we're quite pleased about it, and as I say, just go to cisi.org/AI to handle it. Anyway, I've often been known to close on saying, let's be optimistic. Pessimism is for better times, but we do face a lot of challenges here ahead, and I'm also just as curious about the question, when will we know our commerce is working? But surely commerce is only working properly if it's working ethically, and that's why I laud completely what's going on here today on FinTech for Good. And I think it's also very, very important that we all participate together in raising these issues more openly and talking about them, because they are real, and I'm delighted that that's what today is all about. Thank you.